You're listening to The Monday American, the show that puts the story back into history.
History is all about discovering the why, and I think that in that process it's important to never take the story out of history.
Making history come alive, one episode at a time. The show made for the people, by the people. Dive into The Monday American. Don't worry, we'll be gentle.
Welcome to a very special episode of the Monday American podcast. I will just get right to it. This is not part 3 of the Vietnam War series. That is coming out shortly. It is a very special interview with a local politician who is running for Congress in my district. Now, immediately you might think that this is something that you might want to skip or doesn't really pertain to you if you don't live within the District 4 of South Carolina Congressional Voting District. That said, I would highly encourage you to listen to this interview. It is with William Timmons. He's a South Carolina state senator, and like I said, he's running for Congress. And even though you might be out of the district or an entirely different state or country for that matter, it's an interview that he says a lot of really great things about government and about politics that I think everyone can benefit from, regardless of your political affiliations or your leanings, your feelings towards politics in general. I think it's a good conversation for people to listen to. That said, I think that he deserves a better interviewer than myself. I don't believe that I'm a talented enough interviewer to really give him the type of questions and the type of conversation that I think he was worth and deserves, because I'm just not as talented as an interviewer. So please excuse that. I'm sorry for my own shortcomings there. And the only place we could do this interview, because he is a very, very busy man, is in his office, which was quite a bit echoey. So please excuse the echo in the background. It's not really that terrible, but just a warning for that. And also towards the end of the interview, because he does own a CrossFit gym, at the very end, you can kind of hear me say, "Oh, it's okay, don't worry about it." It's because they were playing music in the background and dropping some weights on the floor, stuff like that. Just ignore that and focus on the content of the interview, which again is for William Timmons. And if you are interested in learning more about him, you can visit his website at votetimmons.com. His Facebook is William Timmons for Congress. Instagram is Vote Timmons. His email is william@votetimmons.com. And his Twitter is Vote Timmons, and that is Timmons, Timmons. He's a really great person. He's young, which I think is really awesome in politics. And all those links will be included in the notes for this episode that you can just click on and get right to them if you're interested in learning more. So without further ado, please welcome my guest, William Timmons, South Carolina State Senator and candidate for Congress District 4. All right, we are here with William Timmons. He is the state senator for District 6 in South Carolina, and probably going to be the District 4 congressional chairholder to replace Trey Gowdy. Welcome to the Monday American.
Hey, thank you. I'm going to work hard over the next 55 days, but there's a lot of good candidates, and we'll hope for the best.
So tell me a little bit about, first of all, where can people find you if they want to, if they're within your voting district, find out a little bit more about your platforms, your ideas, more about you?
Yeah, so my website is www.votetimmons.com. That's Timmons. I'm on Facebook at Vote Timmons. I'm on Instagram at Vote Timmons and Twitter at Vote Timmons. So
Vote Timmons.
Vote Timmons. Easy enough.
So I first met you at a local town hall, and I had heard your name around the city a little bit. I'm not a Greenville native such as yourself. And I was impressed with what I saw at the town hall, and that's when I decided to kind of reach out to you and get in touch. And first of all, I appreciate you doing the interview. But tell me a little bit about your story briefly of how you grew up here and what got you interested in politics in the first place.
Absolutely. Well, my family's been in the upstate for generations, and my grandfather and my father have just set an example of community service, given a lot back, and that kind of inspired me to try to help make the community better. And they never were in elected office. They were business leaders, and they were philanthropic, and served on boards in different capacities. But after working as a prosecutor and starting a number of businesses, I decided that I thought I could make a difference in government, because government was it was impeding all aspects of my life professionally. As a prosecutor, we're just wasting so much money. It's so inefficient. It's so technologically archaic. And just a little bit of common sense to modernize the criminal justice system will just make everybody's life a lot better, and it'll be more efficient. And we need to be good stewards of our tax dollars, and we're just currently not. The other half the reason I ran for office was my experience as a business owner. I own a number of businesses. First business I started was Southern Tide. It's a clothing company. It's been sold a number of times now, but I helped.
I had no idea that was your company.
Yeah, so Alan Stevenson was the founder, and I'm a token co-founder, but I did help in a number of different capacities, and I was there to see the growth and the opportunity, and I benefited from the profitability of the company. But that was the first one, and honestly, that opened my eyes to all these complex regulations. Southern Tide used different countries to get raw materials, to get things manufactured, and it just kind of opened my eyes to the complex regulations and taxation schemes that the government places on small businesses. And it got even worse when I opened, I got a gym, I have a yoga studio, I have a law practice, and I have a real estate company, and it was just the same thing over and over again. Taxation, regulation, overly complex systems.
So bureaucratic red tape.
The government is in the way, and if the government can just get out of the way, our economy will do so much better, and our society will grow and prosper in ways that we can't even imagine. But right now, our business owners are just spending time combating government, and it shouldn't be that way. So I decided I was going to run for office, try to make a difference, and help other people that had the same problems. I ran for the Senate against a 37-year incumbent. Everybody said I was crazy, that I couldn't win.
37 years.
Yeah, he'd been in office longer than I'd been alive, and I ended up winning 2-1. So 70-30 actually. So been serving in the Senate for 2 years, and it's interesting. One person really can make a difference in government. I have worked incredibly hard to try to kind of steer the ship in the right direction. Columbia, there's just a lot of problems there. A lot of them are systemic. A lot of them are just kind of doing things the way that things have been done for decades and decades. And I can't tell you how many times I say, this is not the best way to do this.
Yeah.
We need to change it. And they say, oh, Senator, this is the way we've always done things. And, I love hearing that, because my immediate response is, I don't care.
Yeah.
We're not doing it this way. This is not right. It's not efficient. It's not appropriate. And we need to be good stewards of our tax dollars, and good stewards of these important positions in elected office. And it's been fun to stir the pot. I've been very disruptive in a positive way. It's been a rewarding experience.
What do you think drew you to state Senate, and how has that shifted to Congress on a federal level? So
on the state level, the state Senate has more power than any other branch of government.
For the state of South Carolina, or is that
for the state of South Carolina?
Is that generally for all of them, or
no?
They're all
just
set up
South Carolina. So, and you love history, so I'll give you a quick background. In 1895, the legislature was concerned about freed slaves outnumbering white men 3-1. So they were in a position to where they restructured the entire Constitution to allow. It was objectively to insulate power and to ensure that freed slaves would not be able to take over control of the state. And the effect of that has been bad structure
Is that not
for 130
years?
years. It has not been changed since 1895. I actually proposed the bill along with 90% of the other freshmen this year to hold a Constitution convention on the state level to overhaul that Constitution. But, to answer your question, one state senator has incredible power. They can block legislation. A House member, even the Speaker of the House, can't really effectively block legislation in the way that one state senator can. So, why the state Senate? I looked at the structure of government in South Carolina and I said, what is wrong? Why are we doing all of these things that are not serving the best interests of our community? And it comes down to the state Senate has all the power, and it's insulated within a good old boy network, and they are not looking out for everybody.
Yeah.
They're looking out for themselves.
Yeah.
And so I ran for the Senate, and it's been fun to hold them to task and to say, this is not right. We can't do this. And it's been very challenging, but I've gotten increasingly effective as time has gone on. And it's been fun to shake things up.
Yeah. And what do you think, what is drawing you to Congress other than obviously
Sure.
Trey Gowdy, which that's a national name?
First, him leaving was just a huge loss for the district, the state, and the country. He is universally respected as a voice of reason and somebody who's not going to be the loudest voice in the room, but somebody who's going to ask the hard questions and take the hard positions. So it's a sad day for him to leave, but he's also served honorably for 8 years, and if he wants to come home to his family, that's very much within his right.
That's kind of the way government was set up originally.
That's exactly right.
George Washington was almost forced out of retirement to come be president for his second term, and basically had to tell him to, we just fought a war so that I wouldn't become the king, and you're trying to give it to me. What do you think about term limits on
I'm all for term limits, and I've term limited myself. But to finish answering the question, why Congress? I remember where I was standing. We were in session when Gowdy announced he wasn't going to run for re-election, and I called 2 people in Greenville, and I went and I saw 3 people that were in the State House, 2 in the House, 1 in the Senate, and I asked them, I said, you need to run.
You called them and said that.
I called 2 people in Greenville. I said, you got to run. And I literally did it in order of the people that I thought would be best. And each one of them said no. And each one of them turned it around on me and said, but you need to. And if I could support somebody that I thought would be an effective advocate for the 4th Congressional District in D.C., I would do that. I don't think that... I think we have to send a fighter. We have to send somebody that's proven. We have to send somebody that has the experience, the education necessary to continue Gowdy's legacy, to continue this important fight. I really do think that the federal government's off the rails, and they've just lost their mind. And I think we're approaching a cliff, and I think we're approaching a point of no return. And if we do not send somebody that is going to do everything possible to try to get the country back on track, and that has a reasonable chance of success, we would be doing a disservice to the community. So, why am I running for Congress? I'm running for Congress because we have to change things in Washington. We have to hold them accountable. We have to stop spending insanely. We have to stop having laws that are not being enforced. We have to fix immigration. There's all these things that are very important, and I think that I'm able to bring a lot to the table. I think I'm able to change minds. I'm able to fight to get our country back on track. And I don't think that there's another candidate in the race that is as effective or could be as effective as I would be. So
it's hard to say that about yourself, but as just any person in general, you feel it's hard to say that, but if you can and you mean it, then you're doing what you're doing right now.
It's a fine line because I am confident in my abilities, and I do want to help fix D.C. I think I have helped fix Columbia. It is moving in the right direction. There's a lot of people that are like-minded. I can't tell you how fun it's been to say what the whole room's thinking, but nobody wants to say it because it's
taboo almost. Or
you're rocking the boat, and everybody's mad about what's going on, but what do you really do other than stand up and point out the hypocrisy or point out the corruption? It's been awesome to say this isn't right. We can't do this, and then other people in the room go, "Yeah, he's right," and it takes a lot of confidence to stand up and say this isn't right. You're telling people that have been in the legislature for longer than you've been alive. There's 5 people in the Senate that have been there longer than I've been alive. Yes. And to stand up and say that they're wrong and they can't do that is not easy. It takes a little bit of a crazy person to do it. But I think that I'm willing to do it. 2, somebody's got to do it. And, I'm not yelling at them. I'm not being disrespectful. I'm just saying this isn't right. We can't do things this way, and this is why, and we got to change things. And there's certain people in this race that have proven that they can yell and scream and tell people they're idiots. And I don't think that that's what Washington needs. I think that Washington needs people that are going to be measured and going to say, this is not good policy. This is unsustainable. And it's immoral to pass on crippling debt to the next generation. We need to get a hold of this. And you don't need to yell.
Yeah.
You just need to make your point, have a dialogue, and say, tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me why it's okay for us to continue spending money we don't have. I'd love to be, I would love to feel
wrong.
Differently.
Yeah.
I would love to think that this is sustainable, because then I wouldn't think that our country's on the verge of collapse. But, it ultimately, I don't think that you can make the argument that we can continue this unsustainable spending. And if you have that dialogue in a meaningful way, people will say, no, you're right. We can't do this. And that's a very hard conversation to have. And it's an important conversation to have, because we're not going to be able to have that conversation in 10 years. It's just going to be, how are we going to get out of this without collapsing? And that's a losing battle.
What do you think I follow you on your social media pages and everything. And one of the things I was really impressed with was you willingly give out your cell phone number to anyone with criticism, which speaks volumes without saying much. Is that is everyone doing that these days who's running, or is it just something you're just doing?
So I did it for my state Senate campaign.
Okay.
And
positive feedback from that.
Everybody has access to me. I cannot tell you how many times people call me and I pick up and they're just confused. And I just say, I answer the phone the same way. I say, hello, this is William. And they go, this is William? And I say, yes, what can I do for you? And they said, well, I didn't think you would pick up. And I said, that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
What can I do for you?
It really, it's such a small gesture that highlights a big issue that's kind of happened more and more as time's gone on. We don't have access to the people who are supposed to be representing us.
Well, and it gets harder. I worked for the Senate Majority Leader, Bill Frist, when he was his last year in office, and I actually answered his phones. It was one of my first jobs out of college. And as Senate Majority Leader and as the U.S. Senator for Tennessee, he had millions of constituents in Tennessee, but he also had, the entire country that was oftentimes mad at him. So I don't know. I don't think somebody in his position could do it.
True.
But I do think he had a lot of focus on constituent services. If somebody from out of his state was going to call and say nasty stuff, he just ignored him because he doesn't represent them.
Yeah.
And as a state senator, I get an insane amount of emails. I probably get, 800 to 1,000 a week. And I respond to every single one of my constituents' emails. And depending on the complexity of non-constituents, I will respond if they're in South Carolina. Sure. But I don't respond to people outside of South Carolina. I can't tell you how many people in Florida email me. I'm just kind of like, what
they're all retired.
What is causing you to contact me? But it's interesting. But I think it's important as somebody representing. Right now, I represent 104,000 people, and I'm applying to represent 701,000 people. And if I do not give them a voice, what am I doing?
Well, that ties in perfectly with something I wanted to touch on, was the role of local politics and how it's kind of, it's not the attractive part of what people focus on politically. I was talking with Jason Elliott recently, and he was saying it was a shame that for these local election seats like South Carolina, like state senator, state congressman, you really have to focus on the people that actually show up, and you don't want it to be that way. As in, if you go out and ask someone who your state representative is, 10 to 1, they're not going to know. One person might. But it's so important because, like you just said with Bill Frist, you said, that's the channel to get communication up to where policy levels are federal, and that's how it's supposed to work. Because, like you said, it gets 1,000 calls a day, whatever. But why do you think the local politics it's become I guess the voters have become apathetic for local elections, and they really only focus on the big ones? Does that make sense? I don't know if
Absolutely.
I worded that question
No,
right.
No, it does make sense. And I don't think people understand that the local politics will affect them more substantially generally than national politics. If you live in Greenville City council can substantially impact your life.
Yeah.
For good or bad.
Oh, yeah.
And then, Greenville County council can affect your life. Mm-hmm. It gets harder at the state level, and then federally, in the impact it has on an individual is pretty minute. So, I guess why? I think in our country generally. So, for example, I represent 104,000 people, and I had 6,700 vote for me to get me elected. So, 3,000 voted against me, and that's it. So, less than 10,000 people voted, 9%. That's just kind of terrible.
And I don't know if that has an easy answer. Most of the issues you guys are going to face are going to be problems that don't warrant a simple answer. That's just kind of the nature of politics. But it's always been something I've just been thinking on, is why I don't know if it's the way the media is so divisive and, intentionally, or if it's just people becoming apathetic, feeling like they don't have, their vote doesn't actually count anymore. But
I guess the next question is, what exactly is the difference between your options? And oftentimes, there's not a substantial difference. Theoretically, you want to have somebody that is representing you that is a very good advocate that aligns their views most similarly with yours. Fair enough?
Sure.
Most elections you're going to get most of your options are not that dissimilar.
Yeah.
And then I guess the next question is, what can one person actually do in the state house, in the state senate, in the U.S. House? So, do people believe that our representative form of government is actually driving the ship, or perhaps, as we saw in this last presidential election,
historic election,
the special interests and
yeah,
individuals that are not making decisions in the best interest of our society and the individuals, but making decisions in the best interest of special interests or, their own personal interests.
and human greed comes into, you can't ever solve that problem. We're flawed beings, but
But I would say that in the 50s, people had a pretty substantial trust in government, a lot more. I'd say it kind of waned in the 70s. But, I feel like when I was 15, people generally had a positive view of kind of the way decisions were made. Yeah. And that has steadily declined throughout my life. We're at a point right now, I'm 33 years old. And I'm an attorney, I'm a former prosecutor. I sincerely question the legitimacy and objectivity of the FBI. And they deserve that.
yeah, that's kind of their...
And that's deserved. And, I think this last election cycle, a lot of inappropriate things were done by a lot of different people. Yeah, agreed. And it was all generally fueled by control of the federal government. Mm-hmm. And I just think that we're in a really bad place.
It's almost like the checks and balances have gotten a little bit skewed.
Well, but the Supreme Court keeps legislating from the bench. They continually don't follow the law. They continually make decisions with predetermined outcomes. They start with the outcome they want, and then they write their way to it.
If I could applaud you without ruining the audio of this, I would do it. That is something that is such a... Yeah.
But they do it not only on the federal level. South Carolina is 10 times worse. Jeez. The South Carolina Supreme Court, don't get me wrong, right now I think we're at one of the best places we've ever been in the history of our state. We've got we have a majority of Supreme Court justices in South Carolina that are going to do the right thing, period. They're going to follow the law. They're literalists. People always talk about, they're a conservative judge or they're a liberal judge. It's insane to me that those terms exist. You're either a judge or you're something else. Mm-hmm. And if you're a judge, your job is to interpret the law, period. And it's not to create policy. It's not to say, oh, well, the law meant to say this. I think that the Affordable Care Act Supreme Court decision is a joke, but whatever.
Yeah, it's nothing is ever going to be a perfect scenario the way it was intended to be implemented. But yeah, I call them activist judges, which I'm sure is a familiar term, but judges ruling based on emotion. What it is their job. As far as I understand, you're the legal expert. I'm just an armchair expert, but to throw emotion out the window and just say what do these letters combine and mean to make law and rule based on that rather than with emotion. God, I'm so glad you said that.
Well, but it's not just the judicial branch. It's a term that I actually didn't even know it existed until Obama was leaving office. It's called burrowing. Mm-hmm. So when you're the president of the United States, you have career bureaucrats that work for the executive branch, but then you have political appointees. And there's two separate routes, and they're supposed to stay very separate.
Are we talking about like federal circuit?
The federal bureaucrats, yeah. So employees of federal agencies.
Okay, yeah.
Whether it's the White House, the OMB. When you get elected president, there are thousands of political appointees that go all over the federal government to facilitate the policy of the newly elected president. Yeah. So when the outgoing president and the incoming president are so opposite on most of their policies, it is logical for the outgoing president to say, wow, I've got all these things that I've done, and this person's about to just eviscerate my entire legacy. So it is logical for the outgoing president to do everything he can to try to maintain the policies. So what they do is they get their political appointees to, and the term is burrow, they transition to career civil servants, and it's not supposed to happen, but it does, and it can. And with Obama, it happened way, way, way more. I mean, like 50 or 60 times more than it's ever happened before. Inevitably, if you have somebody that's in a role and it is logical and that person wants to stay in that department or in that agency, there is some justification if they're doing a good job and, they're not crazy. It's just like, okay, if you want to stay, we can, there's a position here open for you. We'll just transition you to that position. That's reasonable. But when it is done to maintain and protect policy initiatives that were enacted by the previous administration, and to try to protect those policies that were implemented, it's just inappropriate. And I mean, in a large,
in a sense,
is it corrupt? It's inappropriate. I don't know if it's corrupt. I mean,
I guess it depends
it's
on
reasonable.
your intent.
It's reasonable to try to do it. I mean, because you don't want your legacy to be dismantled.
It's a loophole that you can...
And so I don't know. It's probably technical violation. There's probably some sort of a law that it violates, but there's also gray area surrounding it. But again, the numbers, I could look them up right now, but I mean, they're just overwhelming. So that's kind of what the Trump administration has been dealing with. They have these policy objectives, but they have a bureaucracy that's just so massive that it's challenging to achieve new policy objectives. And it's taken time to kind of whittle away at all these different bureaucracies and cut back regulation. I mean, it's been fun to watch. And in large part, he is dismantling a lot of these agencies.
Yeah,
And that's what he said he's going to do, and that's what needs to happen. I don't know when Congress decided they were going to delegate lawmaking to regulatory bodies. As a business, I have to comply with federal law, but I also have to comply with federal regulations. And there's really not a difference to me. And I want my congressman to say, we're not going to delegate our regulatory right, our regulatory obligation to bureaucrats, because that's how you get,
off balance.
It becomes overwhelming for the business community, for society, when you're regulating so much, and it's just not the purpose of the federal government. Our federal system is supposed to let the federal government do the things that the states can't do individually. And the federal government has just lost its mind and is just growing. Somebody's got to do something about it. Trump's doing a great job trying to get things back in line, but he needs help. And I'm willing to go and try.
So let's say you take the seat. The primary vote for the listeners of the show that are in the Greenville area is June 12th?
June 12th.
Okay.
And there's 13 people running, so the highest two vote getters will go into the runoff. The runoff is 2 weeks later, and that's June 26th. It's been kind of frustrating because there's so many of us that when we have debates, it's really not as meaningful as it could be, because, I mean, we've had two 2-hour debates, and I've gotten cumulatively to speak 7 minutes each. So
yeah, it's tough. It's a crowded stage.
It's just hard to, and we're all saying the same thing.
Sure.
I mean, we all agree.
Sure.
And it's kind of hilarious. A lot of our campaigns are pretty much the same information, just in a different order.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so the runoff, there'll be 2 candidates in it, and whoever gets the most votes will become the Republican nominee. And then in November,
Your general.
it would be highly unlikely for a Democrat to win.
True.
But yeah.
So you get the primary, you'll go to the runoff, you get the general seat. What's the first thing that you would focus on? I mean, obviously there's a big transition to make, but what's kind of like number one on your list?
First thing I'm going to do is meet as many people as I possibly can, create relationships with the people that are in the House that can facilitate policy. And really, during those meetings, my goal is to make a decision between focusing on immigration or on the debt. And I guess it's going to depend on leadership. It's going to depend on the Freedom Caucus, and it's going to depend on my ability to make relationships with people in both of those entities, but also with the other players associated with immigration and the debt. So I guess I'm going to make a decision fairly quickly, and then I'm just going to pour all of my efforts into whichever path I choose I'm best suited for. And if we fix, one, immigration is kind of part of the debt. We've got 12 million people in this country that aren't paying taxes. And that's crazy. It's literally hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars over the last few decades. We got to figure out how we're going to true everything up and get it all right. And we got to have immigration policy that makes sense, that we can enforce, and that everybody can live with.
I love what you said at the town hall that I went to. I think someone was asking a question about DACA, because it was still pretty fresh back then. And I don't want to put words in your own mouth and screw that up, but essentially you gave a really good explanation of here or not, it is against the law in one way or the other. And unfortunately, you do have to do something about that.
So the way that I kind of view the immigration conversation is there's bookends. One bookend is a secure border, a wall, and to make sure that we do not have this problem going forward on our southern border. The other end is DACA. And then in the middle of that, there's 12 million people. So with the Dreamers, they didn't have criminal intent. So there's a pretty strong argument that they have not violated the law. So they're in this bizarre, nebulous kind of situation, and we got to do something. Yeah. We got to do something. But more importantly, we don't need to just build a wall, and we don't need to just address DACA. We got to address the whole thing. So then my way of looking at it is we got to whittle away to the middle. So right next to the wall, we've got 1 million people that need to go. Not only are they here illegally, but they're also breaking laws. They're just not, we don't need them in this country, so they got to go. And hopefully they can pay taxes on the way out for not paying taxes. But then you got 11 million people. 4 million of those people, through some program or another, have been intentionally trying to pay taxes. And when they, if they can prove that they have been paying taxes, we need to find a way to give them some sort of a status. We're not going to deport 12 million people. We just can't do it.
Yeah.
But we can force them to pay taxes. We can force them to pay back taxes. We can fine them for breaking the law. And if they want to stay here long term, they got to get in the back of the line, because we've got millions of people that want to come here from all over the country. And it's just inappropriate to say, you broke the law, we're going to give you priority. That's just not appropriate.
It's funny, my Uber driver this morning on the way to the Austin airport, like I said earlier, it was an hour drive. He was from Nepal, and his wife got a diversity lottery visa and came over to study biology. But he was telling me I did not expect him to be as hardcore anti-immigration as he was. And he basically was like, he said that in Nepal, people pay about $55,000 to be trafficked over here. And I asked him if it was hard to leave because, Nepal is the other side of the world from Texas. And he said, not at all. If you have the chance to come here, you do it. He said, but it makes me so angry that these people will pay $55,000 and come in illegally and then make demands. And I thought it was really interesting coming from...
I have a lot of friends that are legal immigrants, and they hate illegal immigrants.
Yeah, it's
because they know how hard it was to get here, and they know what they went through to follow the rules. And they would argue that because other people are not following the rules, the people that are following the rules, their process is that much harder. And they don't think that's fair. And they don't think that people should benefit from breaking the rules.
Yeah, and I think the last thing we should do is just leave it the way it is.
Well, I think that's exactly right. The only thing that I know for certain is that we have to do something. Mm-hmm. We can't have 12 million people. 12 million people is such a crazy number. There's 5 million people in South Carolina. Yeah. So it's more than 2.5 times the number of people that are in this state.
I think that's just over the population of New York City, by just a million or two.
It's just beyond my comprehension.
Yeah, and it's not fair to them to leave them in a stalemate, regardless if they are here illegally or not, and it's not fair to us to leave them in a stalemate.
Well, and they're using schools, they're driving on the roads, they're going to the hospitals. They are receiving the benefit that the citizens of this country receive. Exactly. And if we do not true this up and fix it, it really is just unacceptable policy. I can't understand how we got here. I don't. Did they have this conversation? 10 years ago, we have 3 million illegal immigrants.
Yeah.
Like, at what point was it like we got to do something? 12 million? Is it going to be 50 million? I don't know.
Yeah, it's another one of those problems. I think it's just there is a solution, and it's not an easy solution.
Well,
it does require some.
We need an 80% win, and that's what I'll be looking for in Congress. If I can get an 80% win and I don't violate any core principles, that's all we need. And anybody that wants more than that's just not reasonable. And that is the type of mentality that has gotten us where we are. When you want 100% of what you want and not 1% less, you ain't gonna get anything. Yeah. And then everybody loses.
I don't know if I have many more questions for you. Is there anything you want to add or say? I know my listener base is fairly national, broad. But is there anything you want to say to those in your district that are listening? Say hi to your mom.
This is kind of more to everyone.
Sure.
And I think that we're running out of time. I don't know if this problem is going to be fixable in 10, 15 years, 20 years. I don't think it is morally acceptable to give the next generation what it looks like we're going to be giving them. We can't mortgage our children's future. We can't mortgage our children's future. And it is just irresponsible. And it's something that if we don't all focus on and give a priority status to. We're going to be waking up in, who knows, 10, 20 years and wishing we had done something, but it's going to be too late. And I'm going to do everything I can to fight to fix these problems that most people can see. And if you're in the 4th Congressional District, I would really appreciate your support. I do think that I am uniquely equipped to try to make a difference. I have made a difference in Columbia, and I am crazy enough to think I can make a difference in D.C., and I'm willing to do everything I can to try. So I guess thanks for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for joining me, and best of luck on June 12th.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Yeah. All right. I hope you enjoyed that interview with William Timmons. Again, you can find him on Facebook at Vote for Timmons, or I believe it's Timmons for Congress or Vote Timmons. Instagram and Twitter is Vote Timmons. You can go to his website, which is www.votetimmons.com. You can click on all the links in the show description on whatever platform you're listening to underneath to get directly to them as well. Part 3 of the Vietnam War is going to be coming out very soon. Please keep an eye on that. It's going to be probably one of my favorite history episodes I've ever done. I know I say that almost every time, but bear with me. And to tide you over in the meantime, go check out Juice in the Morning podcast. Their most recent episode that released April 23rd is featuring yours truly as a guest for historical relevance and information. So again, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this version of the Monday American podcast.